morning, guys. Straight 3:50 a.m. in the morning. I'm about to catch some sleep, but in this one, we're literally going to go over photography for non-photographers. I'm by far not a photographer, filmmaker, but I've had several places where like the company's asked me to do photos, and I've just been trying to pick up what I can. So these are my thoughts on how, if you're a filmmaker, if you're just starting out, things that I've started to grasp that have been super key.
Please, if you have not subscribed to the podcast, please do so. It would really mean a lot to me. Okay, this one is for the photographers or aspiring photographers or anyone that's thinking about maybe doing it. I am by no means, I don't really define myself as a photographer at all. Like, I'm a creative director, which kind of involves a lot of the different talents. So photography is in one of those little buckets, and it has not been one of those things where I've raised my hand up and been like, let me do this. It's kind of been one of those things where at work it's kind of came over a few times over and over, and slowly and surely I've kind of learned more of what goes into getting a good picture consistently. I had a photo shoot yesterday, and I had pretty much a team photo shoot where you want profile headshots for all the team members, about 10 team members roughly, and we want kind of all matching background, all that stuff. I was the reason I think that this opportunity came up and was the boss volunteered me again, like previous, for doing a photo shoot for one of our partners, one of our big partners. And so we went out to the waterfall. The photo shoot went great. And that was where I finally, when you hit that moment of clarity in whatever it is that your craft, where everything stops becoming so complicated, and because you grasp several core principles, everything just starts to turn. I hit that moment a few weeks ago at the waterfall. I know it sounds so like awe-inspiring, but it was a combination of me filming for a year, I believe, understanding kind of how ISO works, understanding how depth of field works, that stuff. I had that stuff, but shutter speed as far as film goes, that made sense to me. But shutter speed as far as photography went, it escaped me. And I know like all the expert photographers are out there like, Will, yeah, I know Will, damn. It does matter, of course, what you're doing, but the main thing that I was doing, I was shooting at the waterfalls, and I wanted to get shots, capturing the subject really sharp and the waterfall nice and blurred in the background, just like in a very fast shot, no blur. And this is how I did it, and this is also how I did the team photo shoot as well. These are the most important steps. It's simple. Trust me, it's simple. Like, you listen to this a couple times over, I guess, and maybe you'll get it. I think you'll get it. If you're start outdoors. Don't worry about inside, because that's a whole nother little BS thing that you have to worry about. Shoot outdoors. The most important part that you need to have, or that's the most important part, is you need to have distance, right? This is going to be the difference between a good picture and a great picture. Like, they definitely ran that. Find a spot where the subject, I'm trying to think of a good distance of something that we can all think of. Football field. The first thing that's coming to my mind is football field, but that's so big. We don't need that much distance. I'm just trying to think of length wise. Okay, we all know how big a semi truck is, right? Like the length of a semi truck. Let's think roughly 2 semi trucks long. In the middle, like at the front of the very first of that semi truck in your mind distance, you need about that much space between your subject and your background. Yes, you can have like different lenses that have lower depth or a wider aperture and all that stuff that'll help out with that, but just whatever you're using, I'm trying to think of a blanket statement for most anything that you're using. About 1 semi truck back, distance back from the subject to the background, and then you, the photographer, you need and this is probably what you already have available, you need a 75 to 300 or something along those lines, or a 50 mil with a 1.8. And this will determine how far you have to be back, but if you have that 75 to 300, you'll probably be about that length of that semi-truck back too. Like you're gonna about the same distance away from the subject as that subject is away from the distance. And why that's so important is the further away that subject is from that background, the more compressed, the more bokeh, the more blurred that background's going to be, especially when you yourself are that far from the subject as well. So you're going to use that macro lens to zoom in from like 75 to like 200 or to 300, and all of a sudden everything that's in the background is going to magically come closer to the subject. It's going to be nice and blurred. It's going to be beautiful. That's very important. Now, if you have like a 50 mil or something like that with a 1.8 aperture, you probably only need to be, I want to say, 12 feet away from the subject. Probably not even, honestly, probably 6 feet. You really don't need that much space between the subject if you have that, 1.8. But if you say you did still want to get that far away and you were shooting with the 1.8, that's just going to make the background even more blurred and delicious. Now, the second part of this, dang, running up on time. I'm going to try to hurry this one up. The second part of this is you want to make sure your ISO is at 100. You can change it, of course, if you're needing to. It's a little bit lower light, but make sure it starts off at 100, and crank it up as you need it, but only if you need it. ISO, just like in film, adds more noise to your photo, and you don't want that. I personally, with my Canon SL2, can get up to ISO 800 without seeing any noticeable grain, but past that, it's no good. So ISO 100, we've got the super crazy amounts of distance, so get really good blurred backgrounds. The second part of that, or third part of that, is we taught ISO, we taught distance, your lens. So I just talked a bit about 1.8, but a lot of times for these zoom lenses, they start off at like a f-stop and then go up to a 5.6.